On our eminent panel tonight, I'm joined by Shabana Azmi, well-known actor, theatre personality, also joined by Saeed Mirza, well-known eminent film director in our studios. We're joined by Alka Raghuvanshi, who's curator of the India Habitat Centre. From London, I'm joined by Shobha De, well-known author. She was there, in fact, the whole event. She met him a couple of days back. And Rahul Ishwar, spokesperson of the Sabarimala Tantri family, is joining me from Thiruvananthapuram. Thank you so much. Shabana Azmi, and surely he was hurt. Surely he was hurting. M.F. Husain hid that hurt all the time, didn't he? I mean, whenever we spoke to him, we felt this was a subject he was almost embarrassed about. Yeah. How do you feel here? How do you think he dealt with it, Shabana Azmi, over the last few years?
I think he was very deeply agonized by the fact that he had to leave India. He was in a state of almost despondency, because if you knew Husain, you knew how deeply rooted he was in Indian soil, how deeply he had internalized India's syncretic culture. We must remember that he grew up as a small town boy in almost like a village in Maharashtra. His mother used to wear a Nawari sari. He was an amalgamation and a proud symbol of India's composite culture. And the fact that there were aspersions cast on him and he had to leave the country was something that caused him deep hurt and agony.
Shobha De, you met him, when did you meet him last? And can you tell us about your conversation with him?
I met him less than 36 hours ago in his hospital room. And he was extremely frail, extremely fragile in health, but robust and alert and vibrant in spirit. That's the Husain we all knew and love. And though he was gasping for breath, his lungs were filled with fluid, and he was on oxygen, which he'd keep impatiently removing from his nose. And as like his son always said, I'm the bartender for his oxygen bar. He had a sense of humor and a sense of curiosity, and he was so completely on top of everything that was going on, from the latest movie release to political developments back in India. And it was so obvious from all that he said and all that he has stood for that he was a proud Indian. He lived as a proud Indian and he died as a proud Indian. It's a pity that we did not respect his memory when he was alive, and now the political opportunists want to get in on the act and are asking for absurdities to cash in on his memory by demanding that his a funeral be held in India. I think that is insulting, and I hope and pray that those who are taking such a decision will snub attempts by people who weren't with him during his lifetime and tell them that he should be buried where I'm sure his family would want him to be buried, and at a place which will give him the dignity that we refused to give him while he was alive and with us.
Absolutely. I mean, this is constantly pulling at him, one for the controversy, and then for where he should work, where he should live, almost as if, the country has a right to be proud of M.F. Husain, but you can't own M.F. Husain in this way. Saeed Mirza, we are hearing two reactions today. One from the government, which says we will go out of our way, we'll do everything possible to ensure, facilitate his last rites if the family wants to do it in India. Then there is another political party, which out of sheer politeness I'm not mentioning today, which says that he should have respected the sentiments of the people and come back to India. Did you interact with Husain, and how do you feel he was handling this constant debate? Did he want to really talk about this whole issue? Did he confide?
All I know is that he did always want to come back to India.
He wanted.
Absolutely. And what the tragic part of it all is that he might have denied it on television interviews, but he had gone through such turmoil through this political kind of vendetta that is launched against him. I don't think he could take it any longer. Just the sheer venom and ferocity of the attacks by a few, but the sheer venom and ferocity of the attacks and the number of cases that he had to handle that were filed against him by all kinds of organizations. What does a man do at that point of time? He walked away. I think he was above it all. He had to walk away. But to say that he was happy outside of India, I don't think so at all.
Because there are some people who say he was happy outside of India. That was his choice.
Did he really have a choice?
That's a question.
Did he really have a choice?
It's a very valid question, isn't it, Shabana Azmi? Did he really have a choice? He didn't want to talk about it, but nobody guaranteed his safety were he to come back.
Not only that, I feel very sorry that the artistic community, in which I include myself, didn't rally hard enough and long enough to create the atmosphere in which he could be brought back. And I hold myself equally responsible. I think that we did, but we did not do enough. And that is a regret I will always have, because by allowing it happen to the best of our artists, to the person who brought international fame to us, to the person who raised the bar on what Indian modern contemporary painting is, who influenced a whole generation of artists, for him to suffer that ignominy because we didn't rally round hard enough, long enough to make sure we created that climate, and I include myself in that group.
Alka Raghuvanshi, do you agree with that sentiment? And if it is true, then why didn't the community rally hard enough and strong enough and in an assertive enough way?
Because I think at some point Husain Saab didn't himself want to come back. There were times when, when you asked him whether he wanted to come back, he said, no, I'm happy here. And he was busy working on 3 projects. He wanted to set up a museum in Qatar of his own works, which he was very, very excited about. And he was doing this big, huge work on the Ramayana. And he said, no, it's, whenever you asked him, he would hedge. And I spoke to him about 3 years ago. And he hedged the issue and said, no, I'm happy here. And this is my work, and it doesn't matter where I live, does it? So what can you say? Because there was a plan, there was a movement which I think a lot of people sort of joined it also to try and bring him back. But at that point, he himself kind of stepped away from it and didn't participate or become a part of it.
Yes, Miss Azmi, you were saying something there.
I don't agree. I feel, of course, Alka knew him and Alka has a right to her opinion, and maybe she saw that side of him, but that's not the side that I saw. I saw him agonized and deeply hurt, but I think he had to keep his chin up. He had no choice but to keep his chin up and say that all's well, because after all I'll be remembered because of my work, and wherever I work is my place. For somebody who was so deeply rooted in India, it's like saying that Faiz Ahmad Faiz, who's such a celebrated poet of the subcontinent, spent his life in Beirut and loved Beirut, but every single poem of his and every single word that he uttered was about yearning and longing for his country. How can it not be? How can you say that people didn't rally around enough because that's what he wanted? I don't think that's a factual situation.
No, at that point of time, Shabana, when the time that I'm talking about 3 years ago, that is the time he stepped away saying, no, I don't want to come back, I'm all right here. See, it is a choice he made. And how can you grudge him his choice?
Was it a choice? I mean,
after all, it was really above all these little petty things in so many ways.
No.
Almost like a karmi yogi. He says, wherever I am, it's my home, it's my country.
But question is today...
and so he stepped away from it. I don't think it's fair to really...
No, question is today, Shobha, before I come to you, question is today, Saeed Mirza says he didn't have a choice. Maybe he felt so stifled, creatively stifled in the extremely politicized environment, unfortunately, in his own country, that he chose to opt out, but it was not an option that he had. It is an option he had to take, Mr. Mirza.
And not just that, he was at that particular point of time, he is about 90 years old or 92 years old. I mean, he is aging.
Yeah.
And to take this kind of assault at this time in his life, what does a man do? And then also, despite the fact that we all signed petitions, that we all wrote to the government asking for some kind of support for this man, it didn't really help. We seem to be in some kind of a minority, or our voices weren't really heard. And what does a man do under such circumstances? Because despite the fact of government promising all kinds of security, and his house was vandalized, his paintings were vandalized, despite assurances, what does a man do under such circumstances?
That's very right. But what is the lesson? What is the lesson, Shabana Azmi?
Lesson, I think perhaps we need to get a little more tolerant and understand. I mean, how do we have so much time to hate when there's...
No, there was here a person who was literally shooed out of his own country.
Oh yes, he was.
He was shooed out of his own country. Now we can, in our own collective guilt, we can, say a lot of things. Political parties will say something. I'm simply asking you, Shabana Azmi, and I want that to be the point. What is the lesson out of what MF Husain has been through?
The lesson is that civil society and admirers of an artist's work have a much bigger role to play, so that every now and then when a group of people get up and say that we are offended because of this and we are offended because of that, their power does not become more than the power of those who admire and respect his work, but simply do not have the wherewithal to carry on a sustained campaign because of which a situation like that arises. I hope the lesson that we've learned from this is never another artist in India would have to leave because one section decides that he has hurt their sentiment. I also find it very painful that all that we are talking about Husain at this point is the controversial aspect. I think that there'll be much bigger things that Husain will be remembered for his legacy, for the iconoclastic artist he was, for the wonderful human being and close friend that he was, and the childlike curiosity, like Shobha said, he was totally in love with life. I remember him putting me in his car and taking me to Bhindi Bazaar, taking me to Chandni Chowk and saying, smell the sweat of the people, of the laborers as they carry their wares. Look at what is happening, and that is what will inform you about life and make you rich as an artist. That's what we should remember Husain by. That's his legacy.
No, certainly. And the other point is actually, if this country can have a campaign on corruption, on black money, you can have a Twitter campaign with Anna Hazare, maybe you also need a campaign to restore India's liberal ethos. I think that's fundamentally a point. But yes, Shabana, yes.
He was very startled by what had happened. He was really, really startled because, like I keep emphasizing, he was deeply entrenched in India's cultural history. And if we look at our own history and we've seen how we have celebrated the human form, he took his roots from there. What later came on as offensive to people is something that is part of a Victorian mindset that came our way when we were colonized. So that startled him and that amazed him. Well, that's what we have to think about, that what we are standing up and saying is intolerant is in fact standing against years of tradition that we have. I mean, what is Khajuraho?
The question is that he became somewhere, as somebody said, he became a touchstone in the conflict between secular and sectarian sides. He did not want to be in that position. He was an artist at the end of the day.
He didn't want to be because he was not a political...
No, he was not a political person. Yes.
He was an artist.
Yes.
He was an artist.
Exactly.
And for an artist, he should be able to breathe the air around him. He was completely stifled and also startled by it, by the viciousness of the attack.
Shobha, you spoke this morning when we spoke to you for the first reaction. I want you to share that with our viewers today. You were anecdotally telling us the things that he longed for in Mumbai, the things he remembered. Because at the end of the day, many people accuse, there are some sections which have said today he should have respected the sentiments of India and come back, which almost accuse him of betraying his own country by living outside the country for the last 5 years. Could you share some of what he shared with you about, what he missed? How about how homesick he possibly was?
Yes, the right way to describe his sentiment would be a yearning, like Shabana said. It was love and longing for a country that he loved passionately. And when he talked about India, it wasn't on a sort of macro level. It wasn't about the big picture. It wasn't about the politics of India. It wasn't even the ugliness that he was dealing with. In fact, there was no bitterness in the man, and I found that the most remarkable aspect of how he had almost resigned himself to the fact that he'd been made into an outcast, made to live the life of a fugitive. And he handled it with so much grace because the love overcame and was the dominant emotion more than any misgivings, and that is his greatness. So when you were talking about India, of course it would come back to Mumbai, because Mumbai was so much a part of his organic growth. It was like a character in almost most of his paintings. So yesterday when I met him, day before, he was longing to have Faluda, and we were trying to figure out how we can get Faluda for him from Badshah at Crawford Market, a place which is famous for its Faludas. And I was talking to his son Ovais, and I said, why don't we try and fly it in for him?